Commander Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the viewport, watching the alien world turn slowly beneath the research vessel Curiosity. 3 years of deep space exploration had brought her crew to this moment, and the readings were beyond anything they had hoped for. The planet below showed clear signs of a thriving ecosystem, with vast oceans, dense forests, and what appear to be primitive settlements scattered across the continents. "Ma'am, we're receiving some kind of transmission," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communication station. His voice carried a mix of excitement and confusion. "It's not directed at us specifically, but it's definitely artificial. Simple mathematical sequences, repeated patterns. Someone down there is trying to communicate." Sarah turned from the viewport, her boots clicking against the metal deck as she moved to Rodriguez's station. The bridge hummed with quiet activity as her crew ran final checks on their equipment. After 3 years in the void between stars, they were all eager to make first contact, but Sarah knew the protocols. Careful observation first, then cautious approach. "Can you decode it?" she asked, studying the wave patterns on Rodriguez's screen. "Working on it now. The patterns suggest basic intelligence, but nothing too advanced. Maybe early industrial age, based on the transmission strength and frequency." Dr. Marcus Webb, the mission's xenobiologist, looked up from his own console where he had been analyzing atmospheric readings. "The air is breathable for humans with minimal filtration. Gravity is 0.9 Earth standard. Temperature ranges are well within our comfort zone. This place is practically paradise." Sarah nodded, but something nagged at her. In her experience, paradise usually came with a price. "What about life signs? Any large predators we should be aware of?" Webb consulted his scanner readings. "Abundant life, that's for sure. I'm seeing signatures consistent with large mammals, but nothing that screams immediate danger. The energy patterns suggest a healthy, balanced ecosystem. Whatever intelligence is down there, they've learned to live in harmony with their environment." "That's more than we can say for ourselves," muttered Chief Engineer Torres from his position near the engine monitoring station. Sarah shot him a look, but she understood his sentiment. Earth had become increasingly crowded and polluted, driving humanity to the stars in search of new worlds. This planet represented hope for millions back home. "All right, people, we go by the book. Full environmental suits, armed reconnaissance team, minimal impact protocols. Rodriguez, try to establish basic mathematical communication. Webb, I want complete biological assessments before we even think about landing. Torres, keep the ship ready for immediate departure if things go sideways." The next 6 hours passed in careful preparation. Sarah suited up in her environmental gear, checking each system twice. The suit's advanced sensors would protect her from any atmospheric toxins while providing real-time data about the environment. Her sidearm, a standard plasma pistol, felt reassuring against her hip, though she hoped she wouldn't need it. The landing shuttle Pathfinder detached from the main ship with a gentle vibration. Sarah piloted the craft herself, with Webb and 2 security officers as her crew. The planet's surface grew larger through the shuttle's windows, revealing details that the orbital scans had missed. Rivers snaked through green valleys, and structures that might have been cities dotted the landscape. "Landing Site Alpha is clear," reported Sergeant Martinez, one of the security officers. "No visible inhabitants, but I'm reading some interesting architectural features about 2 kilometers to the east." Sarah brought the shuttle down in a clearing surrounded by what looked like earth trees, if earth trees grew to twice their normal size and had purple leaves. The moment the engines wound down, she could hear sounds through the hull. Not threatening sounds, but definitely alive sounds. Chirping, rustling, and what might have been distant calls from large animals. "Environmental readings are stable," Webb announced as they prepared to exit. "Air quality is actually better than most Earth cities. This place is clean." The airlock cycled open, and Sarah stepped on alien soil for the first time. The gravity felt good. The air smelled fresh, even through her suit's filters, and the afternoon sun cast everything in a golden glow that made the purple foliage look almost magical. "Contact," Martinez said quietly, his hand moving to his weapon. Sarah looked up to see them. A group of beings emerged from the tree line, moving with careful, measured steps. They were roughly humanoid, but shorter, maybe 4 feet tall, with thick fur covering their bodies. Their faces were distinctly bear-like, with small, rounded ears and dark, intelligent eyes. What struck Sarah immediately was their posture. They weren't approaching aggressively. They seemed curious, even cautious, but not hostile. "Hold positions," Sarah commanded softly. "Let them make the first move." The beings stopped about 20 meters away. One of them, slightly larger than the others and with silver streaks in his brown fur, stepped forward. He made a series of hand gestures, pointing to himself, then to Sarah's group, then to the sky. The meaning seemed clear enough. He was acknowledging that they came from above. Sarah slowly removed her helmet, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The alien air hit her face, carrying scents of flowers and something like cinnamon. She pointed to herself and said clearly, "Sarah." The leader tilted his head, then pointed to himself and made a sound that was half growl, half purr. "Grax," Sarah thought she heard. Webb was frantically taking readings behind her, his scanner practically humming with activity. "Ma'am, these readings are incredible. They're definitely intelligent, but their brain patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Very social, very emotional, but also highly analytical." The leader, Grax, made more gestures, and suddenly, the rest of his group emerged from the trees. Sarah's breath caught. There were dozens of them, but what captured her attention were the smaller ones clinging to the adults. Children. Cubs. They were adorable, with oversized eyes and fluffy fur that made them look like living teddy bears. "They brought their families," Martinez observed, relaxing slightly. "That's either really trusting or really stupid." Sarah thought it was trusting. The adult aliens were clearly protective of their young, forming a loose circle around them, but they had still chosen to bring them to this first meeting. It suggested a society that valued openness over paranoia. One of the cubs, braver or more curious than the others, broke away from the group and toddled towards Sarah. Its parent made a sharp sound of alarm, but the cub ignored it, stopping right in front of Sarah's boots and looking up at her with enormous dark eyes. Sarah knelt down slowly, bringing herself to the cub's level. Up close, she could see that its fur was incredibly thick and soft-looking, and its small hands had retractable claws that were currently sheathed. The cub reached out tentatively and touched Sarah's gloved hand with one tiny finger. "Well, aren't you something?" Sarah murmured, smiling despite herself. The cub seemed to like her voice. It made a small chirping sound and patted her hand more confidently. Other cubs started to edge closer, their curiosity overcoming their caution. Grax barked something that might have been a command, and the cubs reluctantly moved back, but not far. He approached Sarah, his expression serious, but not unfriendly. "Ma'am," Webb said urgently, "I'm reading massive life signs approaching from multiple directions. Not hostile, but big, really big." Sarah stood slowly, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. Through the trees, she could see shapes moving, large shapes. As they emerged into the clearing, Sarah understood what Webb meant. They were the same species as Grax and his people, but these were adults in every sense. Where Grax stood about 4 feet tall, these newcomers were easily 7 or 8 feet, with massive shoulders and arms that looked capable of bending steel. Their fur was darker, often scarred, and their eyes held a wariness that the smaller group lacked. "Warriors," Martinez said softly. Sarah nodded. These were clearly the protectors of the tribe, come to investigate the strangers who had fallen from the sky. One of them, a massive female with silver-streaked black fur, stepped forward and engaged in what appeared to be an urgent conversation with Grax. The conversation involved a lot of gesturing toward Sarah's group, toward the sky, and toward the cubs who were still trying to edge closer to the fascinating aliens. Sarah could follow some of the emotional content, even without understanding the words. The warrior was concerned, protective, but not necessarily hostile. Grax seemed to be explaining, reassuring. Finally, the large female approached Sarah directly. She was intimidating up close, easily twice Sarah's size, and clearly powerful enough to tear a human apart with her bare hands. But her approach was measured, controlled. She pointed to Sarah, then to herself, then made a complex gesture that involved covering her eyes, then pointing to the cubs. "I think she's asking if we're here to hurt the children," Webb interpreted. Sarah shook her head emphatically, then knelt again, opening her arms wide to show she carried no weapons in her hands. She pointed to the cubs, then to herself, and made what she hoped was a protective gesture. The warrior studied her for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been approval. She turned and barked something to the other warriors, who relaxed noticeably. Over the next hour, a remarkable thing happened. The two groups began to communicate. It was primitive, mostly gesture and demonstration, but effective. Sarah showed them pictures on her tablet device of Earth, of humans, of the journey through space. The aliens showed her their settlement, their tools, their art. The cubs were fascinated by everything the humans carried. Sarah let them examine her scanner, her communicator, even her boots. They were careful with everything, returning each item exactly as they found it. Their parents watched with proud smiles. "These people have a sophisticated society," Webb observed as he watched a group of aliens demonstrate what appeared to be a complex mathematical concept using sticks and stones. "They understand agriculture, metallurgy, astronomy. They're not primitive at all, just early in their technological development." Sarah nodded, but she was watching the cubs. They had lost their initial shyness and were now playing around the humans' feet, occasionally tugging on equipment or trying to communicate in their chirping language. One particularly bold cub had decided that Sarah's leg was an excellent climbing post. "Ma'am," Rodriguez's voice crackled through her comm unit. "We've got company. Multiple spacecraft approaching from beyond the system. Non-human configuration, and they're big." Sarah's blood went cold. "How long until they arrive?" "At their current speed, maybe 6 hours." She looked around at the peaceful gathering, at the cubs playing in the golden afternoon light, at the adults who had welcomed strangers from the stars with curiosity instead of fear. "Pack it up," she ordered quietly. "We need to get back to the ship." Grax must have sensed the change in mood. He approached Sarah with concern evident on his face, making questioning gestures. Sarah pointed to the sky, then made sweeping motions with her hands. She tried to convey urgency, danger, the need to leave quickly. The warrior female understood immediately. She barked sharp commands, and the adults began gathering the cubs, preparing for what was clearly an established emergency protocol. But the cubs didn't want to leave. They had been having too much fun with their new friends. Several of them ran to Sarah, clinging to her legs and chittering in what was obviously protest. Sarah knelt and gently detached them, her heart breaking a little. She pointed to the sky again, then made a gesture she hoped conveyed bad things coming. One of the cubs, the first one who had approached her, looked up at her with those enormous eyes and made a sound that was clearly a question. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her, alien but somehow familiar in their concern and affection. These are good people. They deserve better than whatever was coming from space. She stood, her decision made. "Martinez, Rodriguez, get back to the ship. Prep for immediate departure and get a message to Earth Command. Full priority." "Ma'am, what about you?" Sarah looked at the cubs clustered around her feet, at Grax who had shown such trust, at the warriors who were clearly preparing to defend their families against unknown threats. "I'll be back," she said firmly. "Tell Torres to keep the engines warm." As her men reluctantly departed for the shuttle, Sarah turned to face the alien families who had welcomed her. Whatever was coming from the depths of space, these people wouldn't face it alone. She had made a promise, and she intended to keep it. The cubs seemed to understand that she was staying. They chirped happily and resumed their exploration of her equipment, while their parents looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. Sarah checked her weapons and her suit's power supply. 6 hours to prepare for the unknown. She hoped it would be enough. The alien ships arrived like dark storm clouds against the star field, their hulls reflecting no light as they descended toward the planet's surface. Sarah crouched behind the makeshift barricade she had helped the bear-like aliens construct, watching through her scanner as the massive vessels settled into the valley beyond the forest. Grax chittered something urgent to the warrior female, who Sarah had learned was called Kessa. The conversation was rapid and filled with what sounded like tactical planning. Sarah didn't need to understand their language to recognize military coordination when she heard it. "Sarah, friend," Grax said, using the few human words he had learned during their crash course in communication. He pointed to a cave entrance carved into the hillside behind them. "Cub safe. You safe." Sarah shook her head. "I stay. Fight together." Grax's furry face showed confusion, then something that might have been admiration. He turned to Kessa and repeated Sarah's words in their own language. The massive warrior looked at Sarah with new respect, then barked orders to her troops. The aliens moved with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves behind trees and rocks in a defensive perimeter around the cave entrance. Sarah noticed that every adult had retracted their claws, revealing weapons that put her plasma pistol to shame. These weren't just farmers and craftspeople. They were warriors who happened to live peaceful lives. Through the trees, Sarah could see movement. The new arrivals were advancing through the forest, and they didn't look friendly. Her scanner picked up their biosignatures as they approached. Humanoid, but tall, with heat signatures suggesting reptilian physiology. Their equipment readings showed advanced technology, definitely more sophisticated than anything humanity possessed. "Slavers," Kessa growled, pointing toward the approaching figures. She made a gesture that Sarah interpreted as chains, then pointed to the cave where the cubs were hidden. Sarah's blood boiled. These weren't explorers or diplomats. They were raiders, here to capture innocents for some horrible purpose. She checked her weapons charge and moved to a better firing position. The first group of raiders emerged into the clearing where Sarah had first met Grax's people. There were 12 of them, moving in military formation. They were indeed reptilian, with scaled skin that shifted color to match their surroundings. Their weapons looked like energy rifles, probably capable of stunning rather than killing. They wanted their prey alive. Kessa raised one massive paw, waiting for the right moment. The raiders spread out, clearly searching for the inhabitants they had detected from orbit. One of them stopped near the spot where Sarah's shuttle had landed, examining the disturbed ground with professional interest. The raider leader, distinguishable by more elaborate armor and a crest of spines along his skull, gestured to his troops. They began moving toward the forest in a sweep pattern that would inevitably lead them to the hidden cave. Kessa's paw dropped. The forest erupted in fury. The bear warriors burst from their concealment with roars that shook leaves from the trees, their claws gleaming as they charged the startled raiders. Sarah added her plasma fire to the assault, her weapon's bright bolts catching 2 of the reptilian soldiers before they could react. But the raiders were professional soldiers, and they recovered quickly. Return fire filled the air with crackling energy beams. Sarah dove for cover as a shot sizzled past her head, leaving a smoking crater in the tree behind her. Grax appeared beside her, his smaller frame making him harder to target. "Behind," he warned, pointing to movement in the trees. More raiders were flanking them, trying to circle around to the cave entrance. Sarah could see their plan: pin down the defenders while a second team capture the cubs. It was tactically sound and absolutely unacceptable. "Kessa," Sarah shouted, pointing toward the flanking movement. The warrior female was in the middle of a brutal hand-to-hand fight with 2 raiders, her claws striking faster than Sarah could follow. But she heard the warning and roared something to her troops. 3 of the bear warriors immediately broke off their engagements and charged toward the flanking force. Sarah found herself running alongside them, her human speed barely keeping up with their powerful strides. The flanking raiders had almost reached the cave entrance when the bear warriors hit them like a furry avalanche. The combat was vicious and close quarters. Sarah watched in amazement as Grax, barely half the size of the reptilian soldiers, used his speed and agility to dart between them, his claws finding gaps in their armor with surgical precision. These people knew how to fight, but more raiders kept coming. Sarah's scanner showed at least 40 more emerging from the alien ships, all heading toward their position. They were going to be overwhelmed. "We need to fall back to the cave," Sarah called out, firing at another group of advancing reptilians. Defensive position. Kessa understood the tactical necessity even if she didn't speak human languages. She bellowed orders, and the bear warriors began a fighting withdrawal toward the cave entrance. Sarah provided covering fire, her plasma pistol proving effective against the raiders' armor at close range. They reached the cave entrance just as the main force of raiders broke through the tree line. Sarah could see the reptilian commander studying the defensive position with calculating eyes. He wasn't going to waste more troops on a direct assault. He was planning something else. Inside the cave, the cubs were clustered together, their parents trying to comfort them while maintaining watch positions. The little ones who had played around Sarah's feet just hours ago now looked at her with frightened eyes, chittering softly to each other. Sarah knelt among them, checking her weapon's power level. 2/3 charge remaining. Not enough for a prolonged siege. "Grax," she said, catching the small male's attention. "How many cubs?" He held up both paws twice, then 3 more fingers. 23 cubs, ranging from tiny infants to adolescents who were almost ready to join the adult defenders. Sarah's comm unit crackled with static. "Commander Chun, this is Rodriguez. Do you copy?" "I copy, Lieutenant. What's your status?" "We're back at the ship, ma'am. Torres has the engines hot, and Captain's permission to take whatever action necessary. We got weapons locked on the raider ships, but they've raised some kind of energy barrier. Our plasma cannons can't penetrate." Sarah cursed under her breath. Her ship was powerful, but it was a research vessel, not a warship. Against dedicated military craft, they were outgunned. "Any word from Earth Command?" "Negative, ma'am. We're too far out for real-time communication. The message won't reach them for another 8 hours. 8 hours too late to help." Sarah was on her own, with a handful of bear warriors against a professional raiding force. Movement outside caught her attention. The raiders had brought up some kind of heavy equipment, a device that looked like a cross between a drill and a weapon. They were setting it up directly in front of the cave entrance. "What are they doing?" she asked Kessa. The warrior female studied the device with grim recognition. "Sleep gas," she said in broken human words. "Make cubs sleep. Take easy." Sarah realized the tactical brilliance and cruelty of it. Flood the cave with sedatives, incapacitate everyone inside, then walk in and collect their prizes. The cubs would be unconscious and easy to transport. "How long can we hold our breath?" Sarah asked, checking her suit's air supply. Grax understood the question. He made gestures indicating maybe 10 minutes for the adults, less for the cubs. Not nearly long enough. Sarah looked around the cave, studying its structure. It was natural formation, with several passages leading deeper into the hillside. Some of them might connect to other exits, but they could also be dead ends. Taking 23 frightened cubs through unknown tunnels while being pursued by armed soldiers was a nightmare scenario. The drilling device powered up with a whining sound that echoed off the cave walls. Sarah could see the raiders taking positions, waiting for the gas to do its work. "There has to be another way," she muttered, running through tactical options in her head. One of the cubs, the brave little one who had first approached her, tugged on Sarah's pant leg. When she looked down, it held up something small and glittering, a piece of crystal that glowed with internal light. Grax saw it, and his eyes widened. He chittered something urgent to Kessa, who looked at the crystal and then at Sarah with new intensity. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Grax pointed deeper into the cave, then made gestures indicating heat, power, energy. He pointed to the crystal, then to Sarah's weapons, then made an expanding motion with his hands. Sarah began to understand. The crystal was some kind of power source, and there was more of it deeper in the cave. Maybe enough to boost her weapons or power some kind of defensive system. "Show me," she said. Kessa barked orders to her warriors, establishing a defensive line near the cave entrance. Sarah followed Grax deeper into the tunnel system, her suit's lights revealing walls that sparkled with veins of the glowing crystal. "Power source," Grax confirmed, pointing to a particularly rich concentration of the mineral. "Very strong. Careful use." Sarah's suit analyzed the crystal and nearly overloaded from the energy readings. This wasn't just a power source. It was a massive energy reservoir, maybe enough to power a small city, or a very large weapon. "Rodriguez," she called through her comm, "I need you to scan the hillside near our position. Look for high-energy readings underground." After a moment, Rodriguez's voice came back with excitement. "Commander, there's incredible energy down there. It's like you're sitting on top of a nuclear reactor." "What's that stuff?" Sarah looked at the glowing crystals, then at Grax, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. "It's a game-changer, Lieutenant. Can you target the Raider ships with everything we've got?" "Yes, ma'am, but like I said, their barriers are too strong. Not for long. I'm about to give you a power boost. When I do, hit them with everything. Full spread, maximum intensity." Sarah studied the crystal formation, trying to calculate how much energy she could safely channel through her suit's power systems. Too little, and it wouldn't be enough. Too much, and she'd probably explode. The drilling sound from the cave entrance intensified, followed by the hiss of gas being pumped into the tunnels. They were out of time. Sarah placed her hands on the crystal formation and began the power transfer process. Her suit's system screamed warnings as energy levels spiked beyond safe parameters, but she pushed the limits anyway. The crystal responded, pouring power into her equipment like a dam bursting. "Now, Rodriguez, hit them now." Through the rock, Sarah could feel the rumble of her ship's weapons firing. But these weren't the normal plasma bolts they had started with. Boosted by the crystal energy she was channeling, her ship's weapons had become something entirely different. The Raider ship's barriers held for approximately 3 seconds. Then they collapsed like wet paper, and the alien vessels themselves began to come apart under the sustained bombardment. The drilling device outside the cave went silent. Through her comm, Sarah could hear the chaos as the Raiders realized their ships were under devastating attack. Orders were being shouted, equipment abandoned, as the surviving soldiers fled toward their remaining escape craft. Sarah maintained the power transfer until her suit systems reached critical overload, then reluctantly broke the connection. The crystals continued to glow, seemingly unaffected by the massive energy drain. "Rodriguez, report. Direct hits on all 3 Raider ships, Commander. 2 are completely destroyed, the 3rd is disabled and drifting. The remaining Raiders are retreating to some kind of small transport. Should we pursue?" "Negative. Let them go. They can spread the word that this world is under human protection." Sarah made her way back to the cave entrance, where she found Kessa and her warriors cautiously emerging into fresh air. The gas was already dissipating, and the cubs were chittering excitedly as they realized the danger had passed. Grax approached Sarah with something that looked like deep gratitude mixed with awe. He pointed to the crystal in the cub's hands, then to Sarah, then made a gesture that might have meant friend, or might have meant something even stronger. "We did good," Sarah said, kneeling to let the cubs cluster around her again. They seemed even more fascinated by her now, as if they could sense what had happened in the depths of their crystal caves. Kessa approached and placed one massive paw on Sarah's shoulder. The gesture was unmistakably one of respect between warriors. She said something in their language that Sarah didn't need translated. "Rodriguez, prep the shuttle for pickup, but take your time. I think we have some celebrating to do first." As the sun set over the alien world, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Sarah sat surrounded by bear cubs while their parents shared what appeared to be some kind of fermented fruit beverage. She had kept her promise. She had come back, and she had helped protect their children. But She had a feeling this was just the beginning. The crystals in the cave represented power that could change everything, and the raiders who had escaped would certainly report what they had found here. This peaceful world was going to need protection, and humanity would need allies. Sarah looked at the cubs playing around her feet and made a decision that would echo through the years to come. Some promises deserved to be permanent. 2 years after the raider attack, the planet that humans had designated as Haven looked very different. The peaceful valleys now hosted a joint human-Ursan settlement that stretched for kilometers, with buildings that blended human engineering with the organic architecture favored by the bear-like aliens who called themselves the Ursa. Commander Sarah Chun, now promoted to Admiral and designated as the first human ambassador to Haven, stood on the observation deck of the Joint Defense Station watching a training exercise unfold in the valley below. Young Ursa warriors practiced alongside human Marines, their natural agility and strength complementing human tactical doctrine in ways that continued to amaze the military experts. Admiral Chun called Lieutenant Rodriguez, now her senior communications officer. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Fleet Admiral Morrison wants to speak with you directly." Sarah nodded, but her attention was drawn to movement near the training ground. A familiar small figure was racing across the field, pursued by several larger Ursa warriors who were clearly struggling to keep up. Even at this distance, Sarah recognized the determined gait of Pip, the cub who had first approached her during that initial contact. Pip wasn't a cub anymore. In the 2 years since the raider attack, she had grown into a young adult, though she remained smaller than most Ursa. What she lacked in size, she made up for in speed, cunning, and an absolutely fearless attitude that both impressed and terrified her elders. "Admiral," Rodriguez pressed gently. "Earth Command is waiting." Sarah reluctantly turned from the window and made her way to the communications center. The holographic display activated, showing the stern face of Fleet Admiral Morrison, transmitted across the vast distance between Haven and Earth. "Admiral Chun," Morrison began without preamble, "I've received your reports about the crystal technology and the defensive capabilities of your new allies. Impressive work. However, I'm calling with urgent news. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected a massive fleet approaching your sector. Based on their trajectory and ship configurations, we believe they're connected to the raiders you defeated 2 years ago." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "How massive are we talking about, sir?" "Initial estimates suggest over 200 vessels, including what appear to be capital ships." "Sarah, this isn't a raiding force. This is an invasion fleet, and they're heading straight for Haven." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The escaped raiders had indeed reported back, but instead of discouraging further attacks, the defeat had apparently motivated their superiors to escalate dramatically. "What's our timeline?" Sarah asked, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. 18 months at their current speed. Earth is assembling a relief fleet, but it will take 3 years to reach you, minimum. You're going to have to hold them off with what you have. What they had was impressive by the standards of 2 years ago, but against a fleet of 200 ships, it might not be enough. The joint human-Ursan forces included 50 human vessels of various classes, supported by the crystal-enhanced weapon systems they had developed from Ursan technology. The Ursa themselves had proven to be natural warriors, their strength and speed making them formidable opponents in both ship-to-ship and ground combat. But 200 ships suggested an enemy that had learned from their previous defeat and come prepared for a real war. "Understood, Admiral Morrison. We'll begin immediate preparations." "Chin out." Sarah closed the communication link and stood in the quiet command center, processing the magnitude of what was coming. 18 months to prepare for a battle that would determine not just the fate of Haven, but potentially the future of human expansion into this sector of space. "Rodriguez, signal all ship commanders for immediate conference. Then, give me a channel to Kessa and the Ursa War Council." Over the next few hours, Sarah found herself in the unusual position of planning the defense of an alien world alongside beings who had become closer to her than most of her human colleagues. The War Council met in the great chamber beneath the crystal caves, where the energy from the massive formations created a constant, gentle hum that seemed to help focus their thoughts. Kessa had grown into her role as supreme war leader of the Ursa with the same natural grace she had shown as a warrior. Her massive frame was now adorned with the ceremonial scars that marked her position, and her tactical mind had proven to be brilliantly suited to the hybrid warfare they were developing. 200 ships, Kessa rumbled in the much-improved human she had learned over the past 2 years. They come with hate. They come to take our cubs again. Grax, now serving as the chief liaison between human and Ursan forces, nodded grimly. The escaped raiders told them about the crystals. They want the power source. Sarah studied the holographic display that showed their projected enemy's approach. They're not just coming for the crystals. They're coming to eliminate us as a threat. We embarrassed them 2 years ago, and their species doesn't appear to tolerate that kind of humiliation. Captain Torres, now commanding the engineering corps, spoke up from his position near the technical displays. We've been able to boost our weapons significantly with the crystal technology, but we're still outnumbered 4-1. Our advantage is going to have to be tactical, not raw firepower. What about the planetary defenses? Asked Commander Martinez, who had taken charge of the ground-based military installations. Torres activated a new section of the display. That's where things get interesting. The Ursa have shown us crystal formations throughout the planet's crust. If we can network them properly, we could create a planetary defense grid that would make attacking the surface extremely costly. Kessa leaned forward with interest. The old caves sing together when the crystals wake up. Our ancestors spoke of this, but we never understood the science. Resonance cascade, Torres explained. The crystals can amplify and share energy across vast distances. We could essentially turn the entire planet into a weapon. Sarah considered the implications. It was an impressive defensive capability, but it also meant they would be fighting from a fixed position. What about our mobile forces? We can't win this by just sitting behind planetary shields. A new voice entered the conversation, young but confident. We don't have to sit behind anything. Everyone turned to see Pip entering the chamber, her movements carrying the fluid grace that had made her legend among both human and Ursan forces. Over the past 2 years, she had become something unprecedented, a hybrid warrior trained in both human military tactics and Ursan combat traditions. Pip, Kessa said with the tone of an exasperated mother, this is War Council business. This is exactly War Council business, Pip replied, moving to the display with the confidence of someone who belonged there. You're thinking like defenders. But we're not just defending anymore. We're a joint force with capabilities no one has seen before. Sarah found herself listening intently. Pip had spent the last year working with human special forces while maintaining her connection to Ursan warrior culture. Her perspective was unique. Go on, Sarah encouraged. Pip manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the enemy fleet's approach vector. They're expecting to fight either humans or Ursa, based on their previous encounter. They're not expecting to fight us. Human technology and Ursan warriors, powered by crystal energy that can boost everything beyond normal parameters. Torres nodded slowly. She's got a point. Our joint combat trials have shown effectiveness levels that neither species could achieve alone. What are you proposing? Kessa asked her former cub. Pip's eyes gleamed with an intensity that reminded Sarah of their first meeting, when a brave little cub had approached a strange alien without fear. We take the fight to them. Not all of it, but enough to disrupt their plans and force them to fight on our terms instead of theirs. Over the following months, Pip's aggressive strategy evolved into a comprehensive battle plan that leveraged every advantage their unusual alliance could provide. Human ships were retrofitted with crystal-enhanced weapons and shields, while Ursan warriors underwent intensive training in zero-gravity combat and ship-to-ship operations. The most innovative development was the creation of hybrid crew vessels, with human technical specialists working alongside Ursan warriors in configurations that maximized both species' strengths. Pip herself commanded one of the first fully integrated ships, the Harmony, crewed by volunteers from both species who had trained together since the defense preparations began. Sarah found herself spending increasing amounts of time with the Ursa warriors, learning their combat techniques, while teaching them human military doctrine. The cultural exchange went both directions, with human Marines adopting Ursan pack tactics, while Ursa warriors mastered human technology. Admiral Rodriguez announced one morning as Sarah reviewed fleet dispositions in the command center. Long-range sensors are picking up the leading edge of the enemy fleet. They're right on schedule. Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar pre-battle tension settle over her. 18 months of preparation were about to be tested against an enemy that had come for revenge and conquest. Signal all ships, battle stations. Launch the Advanced Strike Force, according to Plan Omega. Through the viewport, Sarah watched as 50 of their best ships launched from Haven's orbital facilities. Half were human vessels with crystal-enhanced systems. Half were the new Ursan-designed ships that incorporated both species' technologies. Leading them was the Harmony, with Pip commanding a crew that represented everything they had built together. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of waiting for the enemy to reach Haven's defensive perimeter, the joint fleet would meet them at the edge of the system and engage in hit-and-run tactics designed to break up their formation and force them to fight piecemeal. Kessa, Sarah called to the Ursan leader, who was coordinating ground defenses from an adjacent command station. Are your people ready? The massive warrior turned, her scarred face showing the calm determination that had made her legendary among her people. My people have been ready since the cubs were threatened. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Sarah smiled grimly. Over the past 2 years, she had learned that the Ursa appeared peaceful and friendly right up until something threatened their families. Then, they became something entirely different. Rodriguez, open a channel to all ships. When a communication link was established, Sarah addressed her fleet in the voice that had carried her through 3 years of deep space exploration and 2 years of preparation for this moment. This is Admiral Chun. 2 years ago, raiders came to Haven thinking they could take what didn't belong to them. They learned differently. Today, those same raiders return with friends, hoping that numbers will accomplish what skill could not. They're about to learn the same lesson all over again. She paused, looking out at the ships that represented the best of 2 species working together. We fight today, not just for Haven, but for the principle that peaceful worlds have the right to defend themselves. We fight for the cubs who played at our feet while we planned their protection. We fight so that the friendship between our peoples can continue to grow without fear. The response came back from 50 ships in perfect unison. For Haven, as the joint fleet accelerated toward the edge of the system, Sarah felt a small hand slip into hers. She looked down to see one of the youngest Ursan cubs, barely old enough to walk, who had somehow escaped from the evacuation centers and made her way to the command deck. The cub looked up at Sarah with enormous dark eyes and made a small chirping sound that Sarah had learned meant safe now. Sarah knelt down to the cub's level, remembering another young Ursa who had shown the same fearless trust 2 years ago. Yes, little one. Safe now. I promised I'd be back, and I keep my promises. Outside the viewport, the stars wheeled as their fleet moved toward the greatest battle in Haven's history. But Sarah felt calm. She had kept her word to return, and now she would keep her word to protect the cubs who had marked her as their own with tiny claws and enormous trust. The enemy had come for revenge. They were about to discover that some things were more powerful than revenge: friendship, loyalty, and the determination of 2 species fighting for a shared home among the stars.